Good evening and welcome. A deal has been reached on the future funding of water services. The committee looking at the issue this evening passed its final report, which included changes recommended in legal advice. The advice recommended that the words Essex usage...
The Artificial Editor is an independent study and makes up part of my assignment work submitted for my third and final Wolverhampton academic year, studying journalism in Agentda.
Usage should be set at 1.7 times the average household usage. It also states that average usage...
Believability is recognisable as clear, believable information. Believable points are scored when you recognise that a message in a photograph and a video and a programme introduction is accurate.
Last week. Our political correspondent Martina Fitzgerald joins us now from Leinster House. So we finally have an agreement, Martina.
That's right. This evening, after many hours of deliberation...
There are three stories featured in the Artificial Editor: Ireland's friendly against Iceland, the Brexit's effect on the Irish commercial property market, and Trump's travel ban.
Fine Gael and water charges through the back door are now a very real possibility into the future.
People who use and abuse and excessively use water should receive some type of sanction, and I feel very strong about that, and I don't believe that the recommendations of this report have gone far enough in that regard.
The Artificial Editor is also an independent study using Microsoft Office software to store quantitative research cultivated into my notes.
And then we'll have the vote on Thursday. We know the outcome because Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael are on the same page and have secured that agreement. It did hinge on a very central issue, excessive usage, and they did come to a compromise in the end. It is based...
Hello, I'm Kamal Santamaria. This is Counting the Cost on Al Jazeera, your weekly look at the world of business and economics. This week, why breaking up is hard to do. And that's especially true if you're the UK Prime Minister trying to sort out your relationship with the 28-member European Union. David Cameron went to Brussels this week to work out an alternative to a Brexit.
The ECB surprised investors by expanding their bond purchasing program to include corporate debt. However, people are still asking, has monetary policy run its course in the euro area? Let's discuss this with Bank of America Merrill Lynch Chief European Economist Gilles Moek. Gilles, thanks so much for joining us. Let me ask first, I'm assuming, because I read your report, you do not think that the central bank in Europe has run out of tools.
No. I think that definitely the ECB showed actually last week that the arsenal is not empty. First of all...
So it's approaching make or break time for the European Union, the United Kingdom, and indeed Prime Minister David Cameron, as the reality of an EU referendum and maybe even the so-called Brexit hits home. It is a tricky situation. Cameron wants to stay in the Union, but not under the current rules, while back at home he has to counter the anti-Europe feelings brought on by the refugee crisis. So the Prime Minister went to Brussels armed with a package of reforms, and he wants controversial concessions.
Doubtful points can be earned when the signifier signifies a message that has been interpreted in video clips or photographs. If the information is overly optimistic, that paints a picture of an idea that isn't actually true, just an opinion. Exaggeration and overtly optimistic opinions with no references and no facts earn doubtful points.
Get this right than to do anything in a rush, but with goodwill, with hard work, we can get a better deal for Britain.
And off he went. So he's pushing hard because this is something that will have implications for people and businesses across the length and breadth of the United Kingdom. We will start this week with Emma Hayward in Manchester in Northern England.
Since inflation has undershot for a while, they could accept some overshooting in the future. That's the very definition of a central bank that is telling us, look, we really want to bring inflation back to target, and even if we start seeing upside pressure on inflation, we'll continue to be accommodative, issues to deal with. But the message that we got last week is very powerful.
And yet you don't think they're going to have to cut anymore. I mean, in fact, Mario Draghi basically said as much. But you think they won't have to go back to the drawing board? They won't have to reverse course, try any new tools, that this is a plan that they can put into motion and let it stick?
Well, in Europe, you never say never, right? But on the one front, they really had to stop, and that's on policy raising.
Alex Messina, author on the topic of ethical persuasion in public relations, describes propaganda is deliberate and systematic attempt to shape perceptions, manipulate cognitions, and direct behaviour to achieve a response that furthers the desired intent of the protagonist.
One player, Mark Bartra, has been injured. It's understood 3 blasts went off as the team prepared to leave its hotel for tonight's Champions League quarter-final match against Monaco. The game has been called off and has been rescheduled for tomorrow evening.
They waited in the stands for news of what had happened across town at the team hotel. Initial reports were of 1 explosion on the team bus, but then police confirmed there had been 3 blasts in its vicinity. They happened as the team was about to depart for the ground. One of the blasts resulted in the hospitalisation of Mark Bartra, with reports suggesting he was injured by flying glass. The 26-year-old Spanish international defender has played 12 times for his country. Justin Tracy, RTE News.
A hearing at the Labour Court between Bus Éireann management and unions has been adjourned until tomorrow to allow for talks to clarify certain issues.
Fear points are earned when information in the news headlines, photographs and videos report and warn the audience.
In terms of our members, reward them for producing what are significant deficiencies at Bus Éireann to the tune of 18 million, in fact, and a figure not to be sneered at when you look at Bus Éireann's losses reported to be in around €9 million.
And someone has to ask the question, if the trade unions can deliver 18 million in efficiencies and staff reductions, how is that not good enough to solve a 9 million crisis that currently exists today in Expressway?
The HSE has reached agreement with Vertex Pharmaceuticals for the drugs Orkambi and Kalydeco to be provided to people with cystic fibrosis. Patients are expected to benefit from the deal from next month.
Around 600 patients with cystic fibrosis will benefit from the news that the drugs Orkambi and Kalydeco are to be provided by the HSE after a deal with the manufacturers. Campaigner Gillian McNulty had her life transformed after she began taking Orkambi 2 years ago as part of a trial of the drug.
We're ecstatic that Orkambi is finally made available. I mean, this is going to make such a difference to patients' lives with cystic fibrosis. It's a pity that it's taken this long to get to where we are, but we have it now, and all the fighting is over, all the campaigning is over.
In the Dáil this evening, the Minister for Health said he expects the drugs to be available from the beginning of May.
Eric Trump, the son of US President Donald Trump, has begun a 2-day business trip to the Trump Resort in Doonbeg in County Clare. He and his brother Donald Jr. have taken over.
The analysis stored in the records is taken from live news and online video reports. The believable, doubtful and fear points are entered into a Microsoft Access database. Points can be earned by information in photos or videos that are part of the report, part of a story. It can be in the introduction, it can be in a bulletin.
His US security detail arrived at the hotel in advance. Media access to Eric Trump during his County Clare visit is restricted, but he's reported to have said in Scotland that the decision by his father, US President Donald Trump, to launch a missile attack on Syria proves he's not in league with Russia. He also said that decision was influenced by his sister Ivanka, who was heartbroken and outraged by the suffering caused to children by a nerve gas attack in Syria. Mr. Trump will spend tonight and tomorrow.
What is the exact situation at the moment?
Right, David, these are very sketchy information coming in from Washington and from the Pentagon. But what we're given to understand is that the U.S. Navy has launched 50 to 60 Tomahawk cruise missiles from 2 U.S. Navy destroyers in the Mediterranean, and these were primarily targeted at the Shairat airfield, not very far from Damascus, the capital of Syria. Now, this is the airfield, according to the Americans and the U.S. and its allies, from where the Russian aircraft had taken off and allegedly dropped bombs in Idlib province on Tuesday, which claimed more than 78 lives, including about 20-odd children. So this is the latest information coming in from the Pentagon, the U.S. Department of Defense, saying that the U.S. Navy has launched 50 to 60 Tomahawk cruise missiles from 2 U.S. Navy destroyers in the Mediterranean. Devina?
All right, and Ramesh, can you tell us how is the situation likely to unfold over the next few hours, perhaps the next few days?
Well, Devina, drums of war clearly can be heard emanating from the U.S. and its allies, because especially in the aftermath of the Tuesday's chemical attack at the Khan Sheikhoun town in Idlib province of Syria, which claimed, as I said, 70-odd lives. Since then, the U.S. and its allies have heightened and stepped up their rhetoric against Syria and against Bashar al-Assad. So it remains to be seen where the U.S. and its allies go from here.
America has responded to Syria's deadly chemical attack on civilians. We're live to Ashley Mullaney. Hello, Ashley. President Trump's ordered missile strikes.
Yes, these reports just coming through in the last 5 minutes that the United States has launched a military strike on the Syrian regime. Now, this strike, we understand, includes the strike of Tomahawk missiles that have been fired to strike a Syrian airfield, hitting planes and hangars. Donald Trump was under pressure to act after these chemical attacks that we saw in the past couple of days.
A distraught father stumbles from one gravestone to another. Here on the edge of town, Abdel Hamid al-Yusuf has buried 16 members of his family, including his wife and twins, the innocent victims of a chemical attack and war crime that has shocked the world.
It's a serious matter. It requires a serious response.
After declaring it would stay out of Syrian politics just days ago, the Trump administration had this stark warning for Bashar al-Assad.
With the acts that he has taken, it would seem that there would be no role for him to govern the Syrian people.
Images like these horrified President Trump. He campaigned on putting America first, but has since acknowledged the humanitarian crisis is now his responsibility. Aboard Air Force One, the commander-in-chief was considering options for a military strike.
I think what happened in Syria is a disgrace to humanity. And he's there, and I guess he's running things, so something should happen.
At stake, his relationship with Russia, a staunch ally of the Assad regime.
We have to keep in mind that
Vladimir Putin has claimed the United States is planning a fresh wave of airstrikes in Syria. However, the White House has accused Moscow of carrying out a campaign of disinformation to deflect blame from Syrian government forces for last week's chemical attack.
President Trump's foreign minister arrived in Moscow for what's expected to be a difficult meeting with his Russian counterpart. Tensions between the two powers have escalated following last week's US missile strikes on a Syrian airbase in response to a chemical weapons attack on civilians. An attack that's being blamed on regime forces and one that Russia bears a heavy responsibility for, according to the US Secretary of State.
It is unclear whether Russia failed to take this obligation seriously or Russia has been incompetent. But this distinction doesn't much matter to the dead. We can't let this happen again.
Earlier, G7 foreign ministers meeting in Italy agreed there could be no solution to the Syrian conflict as long as President Assad remains in power. But they rejected a call by Britain for new sanctions against Russia and Syria. Shortly before Mr. Tillerson arrived in Moscow, President Putin upped the ante. He claimed the US was planning new missile strikes on Damascus. He had intelligence, he said, that some substance would be planted with the aim of blaming the Syrian government for using chemical weapons. Tonight, the
You
US...
say that, and there's another line come out of Russia and the Kremlin. Russia's Deputy Foreign Minister has said that US rhetoric is primitive and loutish. Direct quote from the Kremlin.
It does take the attention away from the Trump administration and what they're doing. I mean, he's taken all the flack, which might work in the interests of President Trump.
Given Trump has had this war with the media,
which Spice has been fighting, he's the commander of that war.
But given he's had that war with the media, you know, it'd be a big climb down for Trump then to fire the man that's been at the front of that media war. I don't think he's going to get fired.
Causing the mess. They're meant to be clearing up other people.
And United Airlines CEO apologises after passenger is dragged off overbooked plane.
The Garda Commissioner came to the AGSI conference this afternoon to be told of an erosion of public confidence in a severely damaged organisation, whose officers say they're demoralised and demotivated like never before. Tonight, deputies are debating a Fianna Fáil motion on Garda reform.
Since January of this year, the Policing Authority has been given a collaborative role in respect of assessing the capacity of the Garda Commissioner.
The Policing Authority already has the power to recommend to the Government the removal of certain Garda officers from their post, including the Garda Commissioner. However, inadvertently, I believe that the attempt in the motion to move the authority in that direction could interfere with its independence.
Welcome back to Sunrise. We're discussing the big topics of the day. One of them is still United Airlines. Most of you will have seen that video now of that doctor physically being dragged out of his seat after the flight was overbooked. Passengers asked to volunteer to leave, and as you know, the rules state when you sign a contract with an airline, they have the right to take you off a flight, but perhaps not like that, Louise.
No, indeed. And there's a whole load of stuff in the papers about this, no surprises. And The Guardian has looked at it. Apparently, the terms of contract when you buy a United Airlines...
Click the terms and conditions.
Yes.
Never read.
How many words, at a guess, would you think the terms and conditions would be?
Oh, gosh. 2 or 3 pages?
37,000. So when that poor man clicked that I'm going to buy a flight on a United Airlines, he was clicking 37,000 words of T's and C's, in which there's an awful lot of legalese, which basically says, if we're going to throw you on the flight, we can throw you off a flight, by the way. Don't expect just because you've given us your money, we will actually fly you somewhere, because we probably won't. And also, by the way,
United Airlines has apologised after a passenger was dragged off an overbooked flight to make room for staff. The airline had earlier claimed that employees had followed established procedures. The scandal at one point saw almost $1 billion wiped off the value of the company.
I feel tremendous pride to be a part of this team.
In a promotional video released earlier this year, United Airlines chief executive said its employees were delivering the best service for every customer.
It's truly a privilege that I know I share with all of you.
It was a claim that seemed very much at odds with videos filmed by passengers on board a flight from Chicago to Louisville on Sunday evening.
Busted his lip. Oh my God! Look at what you did to him!
The flight was overbooked, and the airline wanted 4 passengers to leave in order to make room for 4 staff members. When no one volunteered, staff selected 4 passengers randomly, but one refused to cooperate.
He started to yell at her, saying, "I'm a doctor, I have patients I have to see in the morning, I have to get back tonight, I can't be delayed."
The passenger involved was forcibly removed, but shortly afterwards ran back on board, his face bloodied. Eventually, he was again removed. Afterwards, United Airlines released a statement apologising for the incident and saying there would be a review of what happened. But now the airline has come under renewed criticism after a letter to employees from Chief Executive Oscar Munoz was leaked online. In the letter, Mr. Munoz defended the employees involved, saying they had followed established procedures. He said the passenger had been politely asked to deplane, but had become disruptive and belligerent. The incident has attracted widespread criticism, and shares in the United Airlines parent company.
And a warning about the dangers of the Portuguese man of war arriving here in great numbers.
It's actually quite dangerous for
for bathers, open water swimmers and surfers to be very careful about this.